It's our favorite time of the week again. Time for hashtag Rising Qs, where we get to answer a few of your questions. Let's go ahead and throw the first one up there.
All right, what do we got? Okay, from Evidence Logic, even if actual resource allocation doesn't occur, don't you think that the threat of defunding the police as a result of public scrutiny may disincentivize future events of police brutality? Hashtag Rising Qs. I think that one's for you, Crystal.
Yes, I actually have a lot of thoughts about this. So in a sense, yes. I think so we have to understand that the police unions, and I say this with regret as someone who deeply supports labor and union rights, have really stood in the way of progress in a lot of instances. This is very clear in Minneapolis, where they've tried a lot of reforms over the years. They've had a problem with their police force, complaints for the community for a long time, and the union there stood very strongly against reform. They even did played games like when something was instituted that they didn't like, they slowed down their response times to 911 calls, things like that. And so I think it does act as a pretty effective threat if there's a real threat of, look, if you don't get on board with real reforms, if you don't really change the way that you're interacting with the community, the option is available to just dismantle the entire police force, something that they did in Camden, New Jersey as well, which effectively broke the contract, allowed them to sort of rebuild from the ground up. So I do think that it is an effective negotiating tactic beyond, I also support the policy of decreasing the budget and reallocating to other priorities.
Yeah, I think it's the opposite, which is that we saw in Baltimore, and particularly in 2014, 2015, where there was a height of kind of violence against police officers, just in separated instances, culminated really in Dallas, is that in that time period, you saw that areas which needed or wanted more policing, especially in Baltimore after the 2015 Freddie Gray riots, is that the police response then became much more tepid and made much less aggressive against violent crime. And that increased, both violent crime and community dissatisfaction. And so whenever there was a decrease in policing or a decrease in police presence in that area, it actually corresponded with a huge increase in calls for police in Baltimore in particular. Again, this is one city, but this is one place where we kind of know. So I don't think that I think it will have the opposite effect, where it will cause some police officers, when you say engage in police brutality, of course, nobody wants to see that happen, but it could, cause a tepidness in response. And I'm talking here specifically about violent incidents. We saw some incidents in which, police officers literally being attacked and didn't want to draw their weapon because they were afraid of sparking some viral incident. That also has an equal and opposite force. This is something even James Comey used to talk about in 2016 and the rise. I know, I'm just
really
saying,
reputable source.
It's all across the spectrum. I covered this issue for a long time back in the day. So I just think it's an equal and opposite force in all directions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, next question. What do you think explains the difference in journalist statements and video on Twitter and the on-air reporting and articles published by MSM? And I think what this question is reflecting is the fact that you see a pretty unvarnished reality coming through on Twitter. Obviously, we've seen all kinds of videos going viral of, incredibly outrageous incidents over the past number of weeks. The on-air version tends to be a little more removed, a little more sanitized, a little more cleaned up. I think it's in part just a stylistic, platform distinction. So Twitter, even I would say my Twitter persona is a little different from how I present on air. It's a different medium, it's a different audience. I also think, look, you can't ignore the fact that, on the cable news channel, you've got advertiser concerns and those sorts of things also that are hanging over you. And so being a little bit safer in that venue, that tends to be what's incentivized.
Yeah, I think that's smart. And really what it is, Twitter was like a gateway into how journalists actually think. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's fine to know, hey, the Washington press corps is overwhelmingly, upper middle class neoliberals. Okay, that's good. That's a good thing for me to know.
Good information.
So that whenever you're on air pretending to be objective, then I'm like, nah, I know what you actually think about something.
True.
And that is very much helpful. So that's what I think explains it, is that they want to feign objectivity on the air. And then on Twitter, they kind of unleash their
let
true
loose
selves.
a little bit.
And I'd rather know exactly who is bringing me my news so I can at least filter it through that.
There you go.
All right, last question here. This is from Ayan Bhattacharya. So Ayan asks, hypothetically speaking, if you two could start your own political party tomorrow, What would you name it and why? What do you think, Crystal?
So when I ran my PAC that supported working class, progressive populist candidates, we called it the People's House Project. I don't know that I call it that, but something something in that.
It's funny. That's mine too. People's Party. People's Party is one of the original populist agrarian movements in the 1890s up until like the 1920s, and it was really all about taking on like concentrated power on behalf of farmers, and William Jennings Bryan and these other candidates were all involved. So I think the People's Party is still one of the kind of the coolest, most forgotten populist phenomenons in American history. I would really like to bring it back.
There you go. All right. Let us know what you think. Send us your ideas for party names and platforms and everything else that you want. Have a great day. We'll see you back here soon.
See you tomorrow.